Onto your headphones and pour your favorite beverage. It's time for the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, fresh off the sidelines, your host, Matt McPeak.
Fantasy freaks and geeks, what's up? Welcome to the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast, where we try to make your fantasy decisions just a little easier. This is the XFL Week 2 preview. Week 1 is in the books. It was a huge success. We saw special teams, touchdowns, trick plays, big kick returns. We saw a bunch of big hits, a lot of innovative stuff. You know, we saw these point after touchdown options, this new kickoff look, which has gotten a lot of people talking about it. We saw these sideline reporters, you know, getting right into the action. Pat McAfee pretty much lost his mind on the sideline after Steve Boharness made like a Leon Lett type of boneheaded play on a beautiful punt. But most importantly, we saw entertaining, professional, competitive football. You know, a lot of people were making jokes and saying, "Oh, it's just going to be like the AAF and fall apart." But it looked like a real football league to me. So I'm sticking with it, man, and I hope it sticks around. So on this episode, we're going to get into some Week 1 reactions. We'll look at the betting lines from last week and this week, and of course, we'll break down each of the 4 games for Week 2. And we'll try and get ready for this XFL season. Only 10 weeks. It's going to go by quick. So I want to take advantage of it while we can with some FanDuel lineups and some 3-team parlays, which I loved doing with the touchdown scores in the NFL. So far, FanDuel Sportsbooks does not allow prop bets, but hopefully that'll change with the XFL. So at the end of the episode, I'll give you my Threelegged parlay for Week 2. So speaking of these bets here, Week 1, so all these betting lines, like I said, are from FanDuel Sportsbook. Both home favorites covered the spread on Saturday. The DC Defenders were favored by 9.5, and they ended up winning by 12. The Houston Roughnecks were favored by 7.5, and they won by 20. It was a big game for them. Both underdogs won on Sunday. So the home dog New York Guardians, they were getting 3.5 points, and they won by 20. And then thanks to, mostly thanks to 3 red zone turnovers by the Tampa Bay Vipers, they did not play well down where it mattered. And then probably the biggest surprise of the week as far as the betting stuff goes, the St. Louis Battlehawks were getting 9.5 points. They went down to Dallas, and they beat the Renegades by 6 points. A lot of people were very high on the Renegades. But like a couple other teams, they were faced with playing their backup quarterback, which we'll get into. As far as the over-unders go, the only over to hit last week was the LA-Houston game because of P.J. Walker's 4 touchdown performance. The other 3 games all finished under. Both of the Sunday games, actually, they were set at 53. Yet both of the totals combined didn't even hit 53. So I actually put in a little 3-team ticket on Sunday. I took both of the unders. And what did I take? I took the Dayton Flyers minus 11 points, which was actually 2 days ago. But yeah, it's fun, man. Get into it. You know, like I said, there's only 10 weeks. Both of my bets were for only $10. I look at it as a lottery ticket, something to give me extra rooting interest in these games. But Tampa Bay and Dallas really struggled offensively, mostly because of their quarterback play. Dallas was stuck playing a backup with Landry Jones still healing from a leg injury. He's staying about like a month ago. And the Vipers definitely have a quarterback controversy on their hands, which we will get into when we preview that game. Their backup, or their actually third-string quarterback, Quentin Flowers, looked really good. As we go through each game here, we'll also get into all the spreads and the over-unders for Week 2, obviously. But I want to get into some reactions here from, or at least my reactions from this first week of the XFL. So I love this new kickoff return rule. I think it was something like 90% of the kicks were returned in week 1. You look at the NFL, the return rate there this past season was somewhere between 50 and 60%, I believe. In fact, 2 of the 4 opening kicks went for 33 yards and 41 yards. There's nothing more exciting in the beginning of a game on the first kickoff and somebody springs it off for a nice return. Also, if you're in a league this year, an XFL league, and they award return yardage, which I think they should in an 8-team league, why not? This is going to be huge for guys if you play in formats like that with these guys returning kicks. Guys like Keenan Reynolds, James Butler, Donnell Pumphrey. They're probably guys that are going to be on a lot of rosters in starting rosters anyway, and they could really help you put you over the edge. I also really like the new the new points after touchdown decisions. It's going to be awesome to see what these coaches come up with as far as game planning and scheming against certain alignments and whatnot as the season progresses. One point of contention for me, at least so far, I have not been able to find the stats that I'm really looking for on these extra point attempts. So last week there was 19 total touchdowns. 7 of them, they had successful extra point attempts. 12 did not. So, looking back through the XFL's stat page, it'll just say, extra point attempt unsuccessful. It doesn't tell you who got the touch. Was it a pass or a run? Was it a 1 or a 2? So hopefully they can get that fixed. I actually called the office and left them a little message, displaying my displeasure. But like I said, 12 unsuccessful, 7 successful. So Tim Cook had 2 successful rushing 1 point after touchdown plays. You also had Donnell Pumphrey had 1. P.J. Walker had 1 that was a 2-point conversion. So that was from the 5-yard line as opposed to the 1-yard line. And then you had Keenan Reynolds, Jordan Smallwood, and Keenan Lewis. All 3 of them also had receiving point after touchdowns, and actually Lewis and Smallwood were both for 2 points. One of the things coming into this when talking about this whole idea is that apparently the odds are better for offenses going for it from the 5-yard line as opposed to the 1-yard line. Just gives you the slightest bit more room to play and give your receivers a little bit more space to create separation. So I wouldn't be surprised if you ended up seeing a lot more 2-point conversions than 1-pointers. But that's definitely going to be something that is also going to add some value to these running backs. Another thing that I think is going to add a lot of value to the running backs is being involved in the pass game. I think if guys don't see targets, they're really not going to be worth playing in daily fantasy or in your seasonal league. I think we're not going to see too many teams give us a one guy, 20 carries a game. We did see Matt Jones with the Battlehawks do exactly that last week, but again, I don't think that's going to be the norm. Like I said, Matt Jones, he was had the best game of all the ex-NFL running backs. He led the league in rushing attempts with 21 and rushing yards with 85. Both Renegade running backs, familiar names, Lance Dunbar, Cameron Artis-Payne, they both caught all of their targets. 6 for Dunbar, Artis-Payne had 4. Kenneth Farrell, he led his team in rushing yards and total touches. So 4 guys there that you're probably familiar with their names, and they played well. 2 guys you might know that did not play well. Christian Michael was a huge disappointment. He had 8 touches and only had -1 yards. And Andre Williams, only 3 touches. It was 1 catch for 7 yards, all he was able to put out. But like I said, I think these running backs are really going to need to be involved in the passing game in order to be of any value in the DFS lineups. It's just so much harder to teach rushing schemes and for offensive lines to get any continuity with one another in such a short amount of time. I think these guys have had a month maybe or month or 2 of preseason / scrimmaging together and whatnot. It's just so much easier, especially with the coaches that they selected to teach your offensive linemen a couple pass protections and give some wide receivers some route combinations. And so you should keep that in mind when you're building these DFS lineups. Is I'd aim for those cheaper running backs that are going to catch a lot of passes, guys that are going to be involved in these extra point attempts, like Tim Cook, who was the only player who had 2 successful extra point attempts. Looking at the wide receivers of note, Eli Rogers, he caught all 6 of his targets for 73 yards. He looked good. Rashad Ross, the former 2015 Redskin returner, showed why he earned the highest grade from the Pro Football Focus after the collapse of the AAF last spring. But he caught a long touchdown for the defenders as they won. And then Sammy Coates, one guy who did not play very well, a name that a lot of people probably recognize. He only caught 2 of his 9 targets for 26 yards. Not very good. And then as far as the quarterbacks go, I think in this league, the mobile quarterbacks are really going to be the ones that are going to be the best guys to go for in FanDuel or DraftKings. I think these offensive lines are going to break down as the weeks go on and you see more and more injuries. I think these quarterbacks are going to have to be mobile and extend plays. To me, it's not a coincidence that the quarterbacks with the 3 highest QB ratings last week were the 3 starting quarterbacks with the most rushing yards. So these guys, the dual threat type of player, is definitely going to benefit the most, I think, from these rules and from the way that this game is going to be played as far as the tempo and all the added value to throwing the ball. So going forward, I think I'm going to stick with one of those 4 quarterbacks that are willing and able to run the ball, like Cardell Jones, P.J. Walker, Jordan Tiamu, and the guy that should be starting QB in Tampa Bay, Quentin Flowers, who, again, we will get into when we break down that game there. So let's get into these games for Week 2. The first game here, Saturday at 2 o'clock, we got the New York Guardians at the DC Defenders. The Guardians are getting 6.5 points. There's a over-under of 48 in this game. Both teams coming off a win. The Guardians beat up on the Vipers 23-3, and the Defenders they beat up on the Dragons 31-19. So these are 2 of the teams that came off of 2 of the more convincing wins in the XFL last week. Starting with the Guardians here. Tim Cook looks like he is definitely the goal line guy, short yardage running back. He's definitely going to add some value to himself with these extra point attempts because both of the touchdowns that the Guardians scored were followed by a Tim Cook extra point rushing. Mikhail McKay led the team in receiving yards with 58, but he was out-targeted by the tight end Jake Powell and wide receiver Joe Horn. And Colby Pearson was the guy to catch Matt McGloin's only touchdown. So Joe Horn only caught 2 of his 8 targets, while Jake Powell caught 4 of 6. So I think maybe that might be somewhat of a transition that we might see. I don't know if Joe Horn's going to see another 8 targets next week if only he's going to catch 25% of them. Jake Powell tied Nick Truesdale and Donnie Parham for the most targets among tight ends in Week 1 with 6 targets. So he was used, and he caught 4 of them. He played well. As expected, the Guardians are going to push the ball down the field. Last week, Matt McGloin led the XFL QBs with a 12.5-yard depth of target, and Colby Pearson led wide receivers with a 26.8 average depth of target. So these guys have a deep connection going so far in Week 1. Last week, the Defenders allowed 4 different players to average over 15 yards per reception. So the Defenders gave up 4 explosive plays in the pass game. So I look for the Guardians this week to continue to, take advantage of that chemistry that is apparently there between McGloin and Colby Pearson. The Guardians' defense held up to 4 different red zone drives last week. No touchdowns allowed. They did have 3 turnovers in the red zone. One of them was in the end zone. Sorry. Despite allowing the second most passing yards and rushing yards in Week 1, they were still able to keep the Vipers out of the end zone. They're probably going to need to continue to force turnovers like this if they're going to give up this kind of yardage. these teams, when they get down there, I think these coaches are going to be smelling blood, and they're going to want scores. So I'm actually looking at the over for this game, I believe. Yeah, I'm interested. 48 points. Maybe we'll get to that. Looking at the defenders here, like I said, they're minus 6.5 points. I don't know how comfortable I feel about giving up 6.5 points right now. I kind of want to see more from these defenses. As far as the defending running backs, Pumphrey and Presley, they each caught 3 targets. Pumphrey got the extra point rush, but Presley did get double-digit carries, which I think is going to end up being rare in this league. I think we're going to see a lot of guys getting between 7 to 10 carries maybe, but I don't know how many guys we're going to see have 15, 16 carries or whatever. The defenders with a special teams touchdown on a blocked punt and a defensive touchdown with the fourth quarter 70-yard interception return by Bradley Sealvey. They look pretty good on defense. Have to give it to them. Eli Rogers with the best game of all the ex-NFL wide receivers. He led his team in targets and catches and receiving yards. 6 catches, 73 yards. Both of Cardell Jones's touchdowns came on big pass plays. So we saw the one touchdown that went to tight end Kari Lee came on a trick play where like 4 different guys touched the ball, and Kari had a big run after the catch. Last week and then we also saw Rashad Ross on a 4th and 6 play. He caught like a 30-yard bomb for a touchdown. So both of these teams like to bomb the ball. Last week, the Guardians also allowed 4 receptions of over 15 yards. So both of these defenses got taken advantage of on deep passes last week. The defenders had 5 explosive plays. The Roughnecks were the only team with more, which was they had 6. So again, I look for both of these teams to be pushing the ball down the field and trying to score big. Both teams should have plenty of explosive plays. So I'm looking for a shootout type of game here. So like I said, I think I might be taking the over on this game. All right. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Vipers visiting the Seattle Dragons. The Dragons are getting 3 points at home right now. The over-under is set at 45. This game is at 5 o'clock on Saturday. Devion Smith, the second most carries of all running backs in Week 1. The Vipers had the second most rushing yards in Week 1. Tampa Bay seems like they are going to be a run-heavy team. Down pretty much the entire game. They still had the most rushing attempts, the second most rushing attempts, and the highest yards per carry of all the 8 teams in Week 1. The offense looked best with Quentin Flowers at QB to me. So I think I expect his touches to go up next week. He carried the ball 5 times, and he dropped back to pass twice. He dropped back to pass 4 times, and he was sacked twice. So hopefully they can get him a little more involved throughout the entire game and not just what seemed like just the end of the first quarter. They kind of just threw him in there, and then on like a 3rd and 16, they brought back Aaron Murray into the game, and he went and got sacked too. So I think the Vipers team was just kind of a little lackadaisical last week. They did not look very good, only put up 3 points. They had 3 turnovers. Would have been 4, but 3 turnovers. So they got to clean some stuff up, and especially going up here to Seattle. I think this is going to be an awesome place to see a game. Is probably the best place. Seattle, of course, they have some of the best fans out there. So. Also, this Seattle defense, they just held the DC defenders to only 2.4 yards per carry on 28 attempts last week, which was the lowest yards per carry despite the second most rushing attempts of all the teams last week. So Seattle's run defense played pretty well, although they did allow Donnell Pumphrey to rush for an extra point. Like I said, holding anybody under 2.5 yards per carry is pretty good no matter what level you're at. Daniel Williams led the league in receiving yards last week. He was not someone that a lot of people were talking about coming into this league. Nobody that I heard, at least. And then Seattle did allow the third most passing yards last week, so I think Williams in DFS makes a lot of sense this week. He's probably not the most expensive wide receiver, and he seems like he's got a good matchup. We won't really know how these defenses really stack up against each position until probably after the third game is when I'm going to start really diving into how teams rank as far as fantasy points allowed to specific position groups and specific types of plays, like running backs catching the ball and whatnot. So that's something to keep in mind for sure. All right, looking at the Dragons here. So Jaquan Gardner was the starter, and he got the most carries of all the Dragon running backs, but Kenneth Farrell led the team in rushing. I was surprised to see Jaquan Gardner not get a single target. Only Dallas threw the ball more to their running backs in week one. Although I really like Gardner, he's kind of like a poor man's MJD, and he was good in the AAF. He did get hurt, but he played pretty well. But it seems like this is going to be a running back by committee. Like I said, Kenneth Farrell led the team in rushing. He got 7 carries. Jaquan Gardner had 36 yards on 9 carries. Trey Williams got 3 carries, and then he also had 4 targets. So it seems like they're going to distribute the ball a lot to all 3 of these running backs. So I think this may be the easiest backfield to avoid, simply just because you just don't know who's going to get the majority of the touches. The one guy you do not want to avoid on this Seattle Dragons team is Austin Proehl. Had a big game. Although he only caught half of his team-high 10 targets, he had 88 yards, with 57 of them coming on a big catch and run for a touchdown. I'd say probably 45 of the yards were yak. He also scored on a 14-yard touchdown pass in the red zone. He looks kind of like the focal point of this Dragons offense. Like I said, they're going to distribute the ball to all these running backs. There's not really one guy that's going to dominate the touches. I think that guy is going to be Austin Proehl. He looks pretty good. He's got great hands. He's good after the catch, like I said, and he should see plenty of opportunities in this offense. The Dragons allowed the only touchdown to tight ends last week to Kari Lee of the Defenders. And this week they get Nick Trousdale, one of the more hyped players coming into the XFL this season. We'll see if the Vipers can protect the ball in the red zone, unlike they did last week. I expect to see some red zone targets this week for Trousdale, Tampa Bay's number 1 pick in the skill position draft earlier in the year. I think Trussman's going to want to get this guy involved. He did have officially 1 fumble, but he pretty much fumbled twice. They got lucky that they overturned the first one, but the second one went returned for a touchdown. So I think this dude's going to come out and try and make up for that. He did lead all of the tight ends in receiving yards last week on only 3 catches. So I think he's going to be a guy that the Dragons use in the passing game, both short and deep. All right, looking at the next game here, the Dallas Renegades at the LA Wildcats. Both of these teams coming off of losses. Renegades, they lost to the Battlehawks 15-9, and the Wildcats lost to the Roughnecks 37-17. They got beat up pretty good. The Wildcats are getting 4 points at home, and it's a 48-point over-under. So LA fired their defensive coordinator after this loss. Head coach Winston Moss is going to take over the defense. He apparently was not very happy with how their team played. The Wildcats were also stuck playing their backup quarterback, Chad Canoff, with Josh Johnson dealing with that leg injury. So can't really hold too much against them. But, the head coach was not happy there. He's going to take over on defense. So I don't know what to make of this defense, who they looked like the worst defense in the league last week, but now with this coaching change, I don't know what to expect. So I think I might be staying away from the over-under in this game. Larry Rose and DeJuan Harris only saw 3 of the team 44 targets, lowest target share of all the XFL running back groups. Kind of surprised by Larry Rose's targets. He only saw the 2 targets. I thought he was going to be used a lot more in the passing game in this league. But Nelson Spruce, man, he led his team in targets and catches last week, was by far the best slot receiver in week 1. 11 catches on 15 targets for 103 yards. Exactly half of the team's receptions were his. And if you play in PPR formats, which FanDuel and I'm pretty sure DraftKings is full PPR, you got to get this guy in your lineup. Jordan Smallwood also played well. He only caught 3 of his 7 targets, but he did catch a touchdown, and he had a 2-point conversion catch after a touchdown. The Wildcats targeted 6 different wide receivers at least 3 times. No other team had 5 different receivers have that many targets. So it seems like this team is really going to distribute the ball around, but Nelson Spruce, 15 targets, man. He's definitely going to be the man there. Hopefully when Josh Johnson does come back, he'll continue to have the same target share. I think Spruce and Smallwood are by far the most talented guys in this Wildcat wide receiver group, so they could benefit from a lot of negative game scripts too if this defense really is as bad as it seems like it is. So that's another thing to keep in mind. These teams that have bad defenses, you're going to want to go after those offenses' passing games. Looking at Dallas here, so Philip Nelson started in place of Landry Jones, another backup quarterback starting in week 1. And he had the highest completion percentage among starting quarterbacks, but he did not play very well. Last week, Dallas running backs saw a 25% target share, most of any team. The Wildcats allowed the Roughneck running backs to catch 7 of their 8 targets, and they were the second most used backfield in the passing game in week 1. So I expect the Renegades to continue doing that. I think they're going to continue to target their running backs, especially Lance Dunbar. Caught all 6 of his targets, and he averaged 5 yards per touch. So I don't know how you can get away from that. So Wildcats allowed the most receiving yards to running backs, and the Renegades targeted their running backs the most last week. So I'm going to do what I got to get these Renegade running backs into my FanDuel lineups. I think they're going to be the ones worth paying up for simply because of their use in the passing game. Let's see here. So the last game of the week, which should be a great game, we got the St. Louis Battlehawks visiting the Houston Roughnecks. This is the highest over-under, 50.5. The Battlehawks are getting 8 points. St. Louis and New York are the only 2 teams that did not allow a touchdown in week 1. And what do you know? This week, St. Louis is playing Houston, who scored the most touchdowns in week 1 with 5 total touchdowns. These 2 defenses received the number 1 and number 2 defensive team grades by Pro Football Focus after week 1. They also graded as the number 1 and 2 best offensive lines. Definitely good formulas here for these 2 teams. That is where football begins, in the trenches. You want a good offensive line and a good defensive line. If you get good play there, everything else becomes just a little easier. These 2 teams targeted their tight ends the least in week 1. Houston, not a single tight end target. Actually, I was looking at their roster today. They don't even have a tight end on their roster. And so I'm going to avoid the Battlehawk tight ends in DFS. I think there's other guys that are worth it. All right, so looking at the Battlehawks to start off with, like I said, it was a huge upset for them. Christian Michael was a big disappointment in week 1, as I said earlier in the show. Matt Jones was by far the better running back for St. Louis. 21 carries, 85 yards, averaged 4 yards per carry. He did have one carry of 15 yards, so that's good to see that he has somewhat of explosiveness there. Pearsonell looks like one of the better slot receivers in the league. He should benefit if Tiamo can continue his accuracy from week 1. He had 74% completion percentage, so that's good. Jordan Tiamu and Cardell Jones tied for the most rushing attempts among XFL QBs in Week 1 with 9 attempts. Tiamu had the most rushing yards with 77. Yes, half of them came on 1 carry, but still he averaged 5 yards per carry on his other 8 carries. Plus, the Roughnecks just allowed 5.3 yards per carry and a rushing touchdown to the Wildcat backup quarterback, Chad Canoff. So I like Tiamu to have another good day running the ball. He is going to be probably the running back or the quarterback that I go for in my daily fantasy lineups. The Roughnecks had 16 hits on Wildcat quarterbacks last week. Their defense played great. The other 7 teams had 27 combined QB hits. So the Roughnecks defensive line got after it. Was that an outlier, or is that the Roughneck defense really that good? All the more reason for this St. Louis team to continue to run the ball more than they threw the ball, like last week. 42 rushing attempts, 59% of their plays. The Battlehawk passing attack was very concentrated. Their wide receivers had the highest target share among all of the team wide receiver groups. 20 of 27 St. Louis passing attempts went to just 4 wide receivers. They also targeted their running backs twice, so that's the fewest running back targets in the league. So it seems like when the Battlehawks do throw the football, it's going to be going to these wide receivers. Again, maybe some of those cheap wide receivers you could be filling in your flex spots with. And then looking at probably the best offense, at least from last week, P.J. Walker looked like the best player in the league after just Week 1. He threw 4 touchdown passes to 4 different receivers. He did have an interception, but he also had a 2-point conversion rushing the ball. He threw a 2-point conversion as well. He threw the ball really well. He had at least 1 completion to 8 different players. He rushed the ball for 26 yards. He scrambled around. He made a bunch of plays with his legs. He is probably going to continue, especially if all these other big-name quarterbacks aren't going to be playing, Landry Jones, Josh Johnson. I think P.J. Walker could end up being the best quarterback in this league. James Butler, only player last week to catch and run for touchdowns. And as I expected, he looked good in pass protection. On the extra point to Khalil Lewis on the 4th quarter, I forget, it was first or second down. Butler made a great block, and he's going to have to continue to do that if he wants to stay on the field in June Jones's run and shoot offense. These running backs, they got to be able to pass protect. Probably the number one sour note for the Roughnecks has to be Sammy Coates' 2 catch on 9 target performance. He's one of the more experienced wide receivers in this league, and he did not play well, so he's going to have to pick it up for sure if he's going to want to continue to see that kind of target share. All right, to finish the podcast up here, I'm going to run through a quick little 3-legged parlay for these XFL games. Again, these are to FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm going to take the New York DC over 48 points. I like the Defenders to win outright, but I'm not comfortable with this spread. I think it was, 6.5 points. I just think these teams are going to put up points. Both defenses gave up a lot of explosive plays last week, and I think we're going to see more of that. So I'm taking New York at DC over 48 points. The next one is Tampa Bay at Seattle. I'm taking the home team getting 3 points here. I think that crowd is going to be huge in Seattle. I think it's going to be big in this league. Seattle actually added more available seats for this game because they sold so many tickets. We've seen this Seattle fan base for both the Seahawks, for the whatever the soccer team is called up there. Ever since the Supersonics left town, I think those fans, they love football, man, and I think this defense. I think the fans are going to be wild there. It's going to be loud. I think the Seattle team is going to really benefit. The Dragons are coming home for their home opener, so I like them plus 3 points. I'll take a home team getting points any day. And then the last one. I'm going to take St. Louis and Houston under 50.5. Like I said earlier, this is the highest over-under for all XFL games. This could be the two best defenses. The Battlehawks only put up 15 points last week and still won the game. The Roughnecks took advantage of a bad Wildcat defense, so I don't think they're going to go out and score 37 points again. So I like the under on the highest projected over-under of the week. Seattle at Houston under 50.5. I'm going to throw, 10 or $20 on it. It'll probably maybe pay out 60, 70. We'll find out. But thanks for tuning in to this episode, week 2 preview of the XFL. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I hope you guys are into it as much as I am. Thanks for tuning in, and as always, may the fantasy gods be cruel to your opponents.
You have been listening to the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. For more great episodes and information, follow us on social media and tune in every week. Kickin or Stickin is available on Google Podcasts, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Alexa, Reach.tv, or your favorite podcast service. Kickin or Stickin is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. To find out more about this and other great shows on our network, visit us online at hcuniversalnetwork.com today. Fantasy football is fun, but gambling addiction destroys lives. If you or someone you love suffers from gambling addiction, please do not be afraid to seek help. The National Council on Problem Gambling operates the National Problem Gambling Helpline Network. Contact them today at 1-800-522-4700. Thank you for tuning in to the Kickin or Stickin Fantasy Football Podcast. Please remember to play responsibly and always look for your man downfield.